Welcome to the only place on the internet where we perform a post-mortem on the absolute death of human logic. The human brain is supposed to be a survival supercomputer, the pinnacle of millions of years of evolution. But occasionally, it catches a nasty little virus called a catastrophically bad idea. Tonight, we are exploring 10 terminal cases of people who decided that the laws of physics and common sense were merely polite suggestions. This isn't just a list. It is a clinical study in how ego can lead to a hilarious, yet permanent, exit from the gene pool. Before we begin, a quick legal disclaimer for the lawyers. These stories are exhibits of what not to do, not a set of instructions. Do not try this at home unless you want your last moments narrated by a guy like me. Our first exhibit in the Hall of Shame takes us to the fashion-forward streets of Italy, where a woman named Sophia was fighting a war against her own reflection. Sophia was a victim of the modern wellness industry, having cycled through every trendy diet from keto to paleo and every soul-crushing exercise regimen from CrossFit to hot yoga. To her, results were moving at the speed of a snail, and she was desperate for a silver bullet. While hunting through a dusty antique shop, she found what she thought was a forgotten treasure from the 1950s, a vintage set of slimming belts. The packaging was a masterpiece of mid-century marketing, featuring impossibly slender women smiling with pure joy, promising an effortless path to glamour through something called radiant energy. Sophia saw this as a lost key to an elegant past. What the pastel-colored box failed to mention, however, was the terrifying lack of safety regulations in the post-war atomic era. These belts were not just vibrating bands. They were lined with capsules of radium-226. Back in the 50s, radiation was marketed as a magical panacea, put in everything from face creams to drinking water. The theory was that radioactive particles would gently melt fat away through internal irradiation. Blinded by the promise of a quick fix, Sophia wore the belts for hours every day, relishing the pleasant warmth they generated. In reality, she was systematically microwaving her own vital organs. As her weight dropped, so did her health. She interpreted the fatigue, nausea, and metallic taste in her mouth as a spiritual detox. It wasn't a detox, it was acute radiation poisoning shredding her DNA and destroying her bone marrow. She had strapped on a relic of scientific ignorance, hoping for a beautiful future, but all she did was give herself a fatal dose of a forgotten poison. Next, we travel to the resource-rich but logic-poor landscapes of rural Brazil, where a man named Marco lived by a flawed philosophy. If you can't afford it, just take it. Marco's latest target was a massive oil pipeline, a steel artery carrying what he called black gold. With fuel prices sky high, Marco saw this critical infrastructure as a personal all-you-can-drink energy buffet. His plan was a testament to his complete ignorance of industrial engineering. His toolkit consisted of a heavy-duty drill, a portable generator, and a rusty gate valve he planned to attach to the line. He chose a secluded section far from prying eyes and began his assault. The pipeline's reinforced steel wall fought back, but after hours of grueling effort, Marco felt the drill break through. A tiny trickle of crude oil seeped out, and for 1 second, Marco felt like a king. But that moment of triumph lasted less than a heartbeat. He had fundamentally misunderstood the beast he was poking. This wasn't a rain barrel, it was a high-pressure industrial system moving oil at over 1,000 pounds per square inch. The small hole he drilled became a point of catastrophic failure. The trickle instantly transformed into a high-pressure jet of asphalt-fit crude oil that erupted with the force of a cannonball. The stream struck Marco squarely in the chest with the equivalent force of a speeding car, launching him into the air like a rag doll. He slammed into a large tree with a final sickening crack, killed instantly by the very force he tried to tame. His dark fountain of greed continued to gush into the sky, a gushing black monument to his fatal underestimation of industrial physics. Now, let's talk about the paradoxical world of online wellness influencers. Freya, an Australian star in the making, had built a massive following on a platform of radical dietary purity. She was a fruitarian, preaching that the key to eternal health and spiritual enlightenment was a diet consisting exclusively of raw fruit. To her thousands of followers, she was a glowing, ethereal being who had unlocked the secrets of nature. Her social media was a curated tapestry of exotic fruit platters and rainbow smoothies, showcasing her increasingly gaunt frame as the ultimate sign of detoxification. She preached that fruit was humanity's perfect food, rendering all other nutrients obsolete. What Freya failed to grasp was the delicate chemistry of the human body. While fruits are healthy in moderation, they are primarily composed of fructose. By eliminating protein and fat, which are essential for metabolic regulation, she was subjecting her body to a relentless tsunami of sugar. Her pancreas was forced into a state of perpetual overdrive, desperately trying to manage a glycemic load that never ended. Over time, her system collapsed under the sugary assault. She was literally force-feeding herself into unmanaged diabetes. The end wasn't a gentle spiritual transcendence. It was a violent metabolic crash known as diabetic ketoacidosis. Her body began burning fat at a frantic, unsustainable rate, producing acidic ketones that turned her bloodstream toxic. The wellness guru who promised a gospel of life died because she was being pickled from the inside out by her own sweetness. In a quiet Texas suburb, we meet Bill, a man determined to elevate the American Thanksgiving tradition to a legendary level. Bill was tired of dry, oven-roasted turkey. He wanted the golden brown perfection of a deep-fried bird. He had seen the videos online and invested in a massive 30-quart outdoor deep fryer, a propane-powered behemoth that looked more like refinery equipment than a kitchen tool. On Thanksgiving morning, with his hungry family watching, Bill set up the fryer on his wooden back porch. This was his first mistake, placing a high-intensity open flame next to a flammable structure. After pouring in 5 gallons of peanut oil and heating it to a blistering 350 degrees, Bill retrieved the main event, a colossal 20-pound turkey. However, in his rush, he skipped the most crucial, non-negotiable step of the process. He had not thawed the turkey. The bird was a solid block of ice and meat. As Bill lowered the frozen turkey into the boiling oil, the laws of physics took over. The searing heat instantly turned the ice inside the turkey's cavity into steam. Water, when flash boiled, expands to more than 1,600 times its original volume. This explosive expansion acted like a depth charge, causing a volcano of burning oil to erupt from the pot. A geyser of flammable atomized grease shot into the air, hit the open flame, and created a massive fireball that engulfed the entire porch in a fraction of a second. Bill, standing at the epicenter of his culinary quest, learned a brutal lesson in thermodynamics. Never combine a block of ice with 5 gallons of boiling oil, unless you want to become the centerpiece of a devastating pyrotechnic display. Our fifth case takes us to the majestic landscapes of Yellowstone National Park, where a tourist named Tiffany decided that the park's wild inhabitants were merely props for her social media feed. Tiffany needed a viral showstopper for her vacation gallery, and she found it in the form of a 1-ton bull bison grazing in a meadow. To her, this wasn't a powerful, unpredictable animal with a short temper. It was the ultimate accessory for a killer selfie. She ignored the explicit signs warning visitors to stay 25 yards away and began her approach. Other tourists shouted warnings, but Tiffany waved them off like an annoyed artist focused on her canvas. She walked slowly, her phone held out, a practiced influencer smile fixed on her face. As she moved deeper into the bison's personal space, the animal lifted its massive head and let out a rumbling snort of annoyance. Tiffany, in a breathtaking act of misinterpretation, took this as a sign of cooperation. She turned her back to the 1-ton beast to frame the shot and began to pose. This was the final indignity. With a speed that was shocking for its size, the bison took a single, powerful step and flicked its head. It wasn't a full charge, just a dismissive gesture of irritation. But when that gesture is delivered by a head the size of a boulder, the effect is catastrophic. The bison's horn caught Tiffany, launching her 10 feet into the air. She landed with a sickening thud on the hard earth, her quest for a shareable moment ending in a brutal reality. The entire event was captured on video by the very people who tried to warn her, creating a viral PSA on why you should never turn your back on a prehistoric tank for the sake of a like. In Belgium, we find Annelies, a woman whose pursuit of the perfect tan became a fatal obsession. Annelies believed a deep bronze glow was the pinnacle of beauty, and she invented a high-efficiency method to achieve it. Her technique was a dangerous trifecta of bad ideas. First, she discarded sunscreen entirely. In its place, she slathered her body in thick baby oil. which acted as a browning agent that accelerated UV absorption. Second, she chose the flat, black tar roof of her apartment building as her tanning bed. The dark surface was a heat sink, radiating energy back at her like the floor of an oven. Finally, she lay on a large reflective mylar blanket to bounce the sun's rays back onto her skin. She had, in essence, created a personal solar cooker. On a scorching July afternoon, she put her system into action. The intense heat felt like success to her, and the lulling city sounds soon caused her to fall asleep. As she drifted off, her human oven went to work with brutal efficiency. The combination of reflective material, the tar roof, and the oil created a microclimate of inescapable heat. Her core temperature rose at a catastrophic rate, and she was literally being slow-cooked. The oil on her skin began to sizzle, causing full-thickness burns while her internal organs shut down from massive heat stroke. She never woke up from her nap. Her obsession with a golden glow led her to engineer a perfect death machine, turning a summer ritual into a final, tragic bake. Next, we look at Paulo, a warehouse worker in Brazil who just wanted a well-deserved siesta. Paulo loved his hammock, and at the end of a long shift, the vast warehouse seemed like the perfect place to hang it. There were plenty of sturdy steel support beams overhead, which would have been the logical choice. But Paulo thought he had a more convenient option. He decided against the high beams and instead eyed two tall, neatly stacked pallets of concrete bags standing about 15 feet apart. Each stack rose 10 feet high, a towering monument of 50-pound bags. To Paulo, these weren't unstable hazards. They were ready-made hammock stands. He tied his ropes to the topmost layers of the opposing pallets, ignoring the principles of lateral force. He settled his full weight into the hammock with a sigh, and the gentle swinging motion became the catalyst for disaster. His weight pulled laterally on the independent stacks, causing one bag to shift just an inch. This triggered a domino-like collapse. Before Paulo could react, the rumble of shifting concrete filled the warehouse. The pallets gave way, and a cascade of 50-pound cement bags rained down from above, burying him in a man-made avalanche. His shortcut to relaxation created a multi-ton trap, proving the deadly difference between a support beam and a disaster waiting to happen. In a bustling city in China, a woman named Mei lived her life under the protection of a jade charm she believed was a powerful magical artifact. She claimed it had been blessed by a monk and made her invulnerable to physical harm. This wasn't just a quirk, it was her guiding principle. She trusted the charm so much that she abandoned common sense entirely. Her most dramatic display of faith was her daily routine of crossing busy intersections. She wouldn't wait for lights or look both ways. She would simply step into the roaring river of traffic with a serene smile. For months, pure dumb luck kept her alive. Cars would screech to a halt inches from her, and scooters would swerve violently. In May's mind, this was proof of her magical protection. One busy afternoon, her luck finally ran out. She approached a chaotic multi-lane intersection and stepped directly into the path of a fully loaded city bus. She didn't look or listen. She simply walked, clutching the charm in her pocket. The bus driver slammed on the brakes, but a 20-ton vehicle does not stop on a dime. May's smile faltered only when she was confronted by the massive steel grille of the bus. In that final moment, she learned that jade is significantly softer than several tons of moving steel. Her magical charm offered zero protection, proving that while fate is a comforting concept, physics is a very unforgiving reality. Our ninth case involves Robert, a man in England who treated his GPS as a literal master rather than a helpful tool. Driving at night in an unfamiliar coastal town, Robert was following the calm, synthesized voice of his sat-nav to find a restaurant. When the voice instructed him to turn right in 200 yards, Robert dutifully flicked his signal. The road was dark and rain-slicked, and Robert failed to notice the warning signs indicating that the turn was actually a public boat launch. He was so focused on obeying the machine that he stopped processing the real world around him. He made the turn. His tires lost traction on the algae-covered concrete ramp, and the vehicle slid uncontrollably into the freezing waters of the river. The car immediately began to sink, nose-heavy and filling with dark water. The electrical system short-circuited, plunging him into darkness. A nearby fisherman heard his final, desperate screams, but they weren't screams of terror. They were cries of indignant confusion. But the sat-nav told me to turn here. Robert had abdicated his common sense in favor of a digital command, turning a helpful tool into an electronic executioner. Finally, we returned to Brazil, where another woman named Sophia had just completed her dream home. She designed the structure herself, building it into the side of a steep hill to embrace an earth-integrated lifestyle. The most unique feature was the roof, which sat level with the pasture on the hillside above. To save money, she used a simple, wholly inadequate corrugated tin roof, believing it would suffice. Sophia had a friendly agreement with a neighbor, a cattle rancher whose large zebu cattle were free to roam the grassy hill where her house was nestled. One warm afternoon, a curious one-ton cow wandered further down the hill than usual. It ambled onto the flat grassy patch that was actually Sophia's living room roof. A tin roof supported by thin wooden beams is meant to keep out rain, not a four-legged truck. With a sudden groan of tortured metal, the roof gave way. The cow crashed through, landing with a tremendous thud in the middle of the living room where Sophia was taking a nap. The impact of a one-ton animal falling 10 feet was catastrophic. Sophia's dream of living in harmony with nature ended in a surreal disaster, proving that when you build your house into a hill, you need to invest in a roof that can handle the local livestock. Our first exhibit in this second round of terminal stupidity takes us to the pristine waters of Lake Washington. Meet Rodney. Rodney was a man who lived for the weekend, a high-octane enthusiast who loved nothing more than carving up the lake on his powerful jet ski. However, on this particular sun-drenched afternoon, Rodney's adventure came to a sputtering, silent halt miles from shore. His battery was dead. Now, a normal human being would have paddled back or waited for a tow and dealt with the battery on dry land. But Rodney was a man of action, and action rarely involves reading a manual. Rodney managed to flag down a boat for a tow back to a private dock. He had a brilliant plan, a quick charge, and he would be back to creating wakes in no time. He grabbed a standard battery charger and a long extension cord from his car, plugging it into a 110-volt outlet on the dock. Now, anyone with a third-grade understanding of electricity knows that water and live currents are not exactly best friends. Rodney stood on the wooden dock, holding the energized booster cables, looking down at his jet ski, which was still bobbing in the conductive medium of the lake. Instead of pulling the machine out of the water, Rodney decided to leap from the dock onto the wet jet ski while still holding the live cables. The moment his water-slicked feet touched the surface, Rodney became the world's most effective and most flamboyantly expired human grounding wire. The 110 volts of household current found the perfect bridge to the lake, using Rodney's heart and nervous system as a superhighway. For one glorious, lethal millisecond, Rodney completed the circuit. He wanted to jumpstart his jet ski, but he ended up jumpstarting his own funeral. Next, we look at a man who was so terrified of the IRS that he turned his own basement into a tomb of fiscal solitude. This guy was a fiscal prepper, convinced that the government was a shadowy monster out to steal every penny he earned. He decided he needed a fortress for his assets, so he built a secret, windowless, completely sealed concrete vault behind a false wall in his basement. He was so committed to the idea of a perfect seal that he didn't install any ventilation because, in his paranoid mind, vents were just snitch holes where the government could sniff out his cash. During a brutal summer heatwave, while the rest of the world was sweltering, our protagonist retreated to his cool, underground bunker to admire his piles of money and take a nap. He felt smug and secure in his airtight masterpiece. What he failed to account for was the biological reality of being a mammal. As he slept, he continued to inhale the limited supply of oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. In that tiny sealed box, he was essentially poisoning his own atmosphere with every breath. There were no cracks for the CO2 to escape and no vents to bring in the life-sustaining air. It was a gentle, insidious end. He didn't choke, he just drifted from a nap into a permanent state of non-existence as the oxygen levels plummeted. He built a room so secret and so perfectly sealed to keep the taxman out that he ended up keeping the one thing he needed to survive out as well. He died surrounded by the money he was so desperate to save, proving that you can't take it with you, especially when you forget to breathe. If you think office work is boring, you haven't met Klaus. Klaus was a German office worker who had reached a level of boredom that should be classified as a medical emergency. His days were a monotonous loop of spreadsheets and the soul-crushing drone of the copy machine. One afternoon, while cleaning out a supply closet, Klaus found a can of compressed air meant for cleaning keyboards. To most people, this is a tool. To Klaus, this was a ticket to a brief moment of excitement. He looked at the office's industrial paper shredder, a massive machine designed to turn phone books into confetti, and had a catastrophically bad idea. What happens if I shred the can? A sane person would realize that a highly pressurized container filled with flammable propellant does not play well with high-speed grinding teeth. Klaus, however, was operating on pure, unadulterated occupational ennui. He switched on the shredder and tossed the can into the feed slot. The machine didn't hesitate. The steel teeth punctured the aluminum can, and the result was not a satisfying hiss. It was a violent, instantaneous explosion. The flammable gas ignited as the can was torn apart, turning the industrial shredder into a literal shrapnel grenade. Jagged pieces of solid steel were launched in every direction at bullet-like speeds. Klaus, standing at the epicenter of his little experiment, bore the full brunt of the blast. He wanted to break the monotony of his 9-to-5, and he succeeded in the most permanent way imaginable. His office, once a prison of boredom, became a war zone for exactly 1 second. Klaus proved that while work can be a drag, it is still significantly better than being the target of a DIY fragmentation bomb. Now, let's talk about the suburban dad who took lawn care a little too far. We all know the type. The man whose self-worth is measured by the greenness of his turf. Our hero wasn't satisfied with a standard cut. He wanted his lawn to look like a putting green at a professional tournament. But his push mower was leaving stray blades, and he decided the problem was a lack of power. His solution? He acquired a set of sharpened helicopter rotor blades and decided to rig them to his small, underpowered mower engine. He spent a weekend in his garage like a suburban Dr. Frankenstein, ignoring every law of physics and engineering. He removed the safe, factory-standard blade and replaced it with heavy, aerodynamic hardware designed to lift an aircraft. When the day of the test run arrived, he wheeled his Lawncopter 3000 onto the grass and pulled the starter. The machine didn't just hum, it screamed. It created a terrifying whirlwind of grass and dirt. For a few seconds, it worked with surgical precision. But then, the immense torque and gyroscopic forces took over. The tiny engine was never designed to handle the weight of helicopter blades spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. The machine began to vibrate violently, the bolts sheared, and one of the massive blades broke free. It was launched like a sharpened, spinning projectile with no guidance system and a very bad attitude. Our hero, standing proudly behind the handle, never had time to duck. The blade caught him in the neck, delivering a cut that was far more precise than anything he had intended for his grass. He wanted the perfect lawn, but he ended up as a cautionary tale for why you don't use aviation parts for landscaping. In the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Alaska, we meet a frontiersman who was living the rugged, off-the-grid dream. It was a brutally cold winter day, and he had made a fatal mistake. He had run out of firewood. His hearth was down to a few glowing embers, and the deadly cold was creeping in. Now, he was surrounded by trees, but chopping wood is hard work. He looked around his cabin for a shortcut, and his eyes landed on a large can of gunpowder used for reloading rifle cartridges. In his cold-addled brain, he thought, wood burns, gunpowder burns. Why not use the fast-burning stuff to get the slow-burning stuff going? His initial plan was to toss a pinch of powder on the coals, but then, his impatience got the better of him. He decided to toss the entire 5-pound can into the fireplace. He expected a satisfying whoosh that would reignite his logs. What he got was a detonation. Gunpowder in a large uncontained pile does not just flare up, it explodes with catastrophic force. The fireplace acted like the chamber of a cannon, directing the blast directly into the small enclosed cabin. The structure was instantly obliterated in a shower of splintered logs and shattered glass. Our hero, standing right in front of the hearth, was an integral part of the explosion. He wanted to fight the cold, but he ended up turning his home into a one-time-use firecracker. When rescue crews found the site, all that was left was a smoking crater and a silent monument to a man who tried to outsmart a winter in the worst possible way. In Canada, a man whose courage was directly proportional to the amount of beer he had consumed decided he was ready for the ultimate title fight. After finishing an entire case of beer, he felt like a modern-day Hercules. He announced to his equally inebriated friends that he was going into the woods to wrestle a moose. We aren't talking about a photo op. We are talking about a full-on, no-holds-barred grappling match with a 1,000-pound antlered beast. He stumbled into the clearing and found a massive bull moose peacefully grazing. The moose looked up, likely experiencing a moment of pure bovine confusion, as a loud, wobbly 180-pound man charged at it with arms outstretched. The moose didn't run or charge back, it just stood its ground. As our hero got within range to execute his legendary takedown, the moose performed a single, effortless action. It kicked. A simple, short, rear leg kick delivered with the force of a subcompact car. The kick connected squarely with the man's chest, ending his wrestling career and his life in a single heartbeat. His friends found him later, a quiet testament to the fact that beer might make you feel invincible, but nature has a very blunt way of reminding you that some weight classes are simply off limits. At a picturesque winery during harvest season, a young worker decided he wanted to be a legend. After sampling the product all day, he looked at the massive industrial conveyor belt carrying tons of grapes into a giant crushing machine and saw not a piece of equipment, but a grape wave. He told his friends he was going to surf the belt and leap off at the last possible second before the machine. He took a running start, jumped onto the moving belt, and for a few seconds, he was the king of the harvest, body surfing on a river of premium fruit. However, he fatally underestimated two things: the speed of the belt and the brutal efficiency of the crusher. The last possible second came and went in a purple, sticky blur. He was carried directly into the giant churning metal augers of the destemmer. The machine, designed to separate grapes from their stems with unforgiving force, did not distinguish between fruit and human. He was processed with the same mechanical indifference as the rest of the harvest. His friends' laughter turned to horrified screams as he disappeared into the machinery. He wanted to ride the grape wave, but he ended up as a very unique, very unlisted ingredient in that year's bold new blend. Then we have the young Russian blogger who dreamed of becoming a viral influencer. She wasn't content with pictures of her breakfast. She wanted content that was bold and daring. On a freezing winter day, she found her ticket to stardom, a vast, frozen river. Her plan was to carve a giant, perfect heart into the ice with a chainsaw while standing in the middle of it. She set up her camera on the bank and strode out, the roar of the saw shattering the silence. She carved the first curve, then the second, lost in the impending fame of her masterpiece. She was so focused on the perfection of the shape that she overlooked a fundamental detail of geometry. She was standing inside the heart. With the final cut, she successfully and with surgical precision sawed off the very slab of ice she was standing on. For a split second, the heart was perfect. Then, with a sickening crack, the floe tilted and dumped her and her running chainsaw into the bone-chilling water below. Her camera recorded the whole tragic, ironic spectacle. She wanted to create a viral video, and she succeeded, but it wasn't the kind of fame she had hoped for. She proved that while art is important, understanding how shapes work in water is much more vital for survival. In Brazil, a would-be thief had his sights set on a gun store. He knew a brick wouldn't get him through the bulletproof glass, so he found a better solution at a construction site, a large, heavy, discarded compressed gas cylinder. He wrestled the 100-pound tank to the store, hoisted it onto his shoulder, and charged at the window like a medieval knight. He hit the glass, once, twice, making small dents and encouraging himself with every thud. On his third and final charge, he put everything he had into the strike. But this time, the old rusty valve at the top of the cylinder finally gave way. The tank wasn't empty. It still contained a significant amount of pressurized gas. The moment the valve snapped, the cylinder transformed from a battering ram into an unguided, high-powered rocket. The gas hissed out of the broken neck, and the cylinder launched itself backward with incredible force. The thief didn't even have time to blink before the weapon he was wielding turned on him, slamming into his chest and pinning him against the brick wall next door. He tried to break into a store filled with deadly weapons and ended up being taken out by the one he brought himself. It was a beautiful, brutal lesson in Newtonian physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, especially when that action involves a pressurized tank. Our final story for tonight takes us to a marine park in Spain, where a zookeeper decided to add some flair to his routine with a 600-pound sea lion. He wanted a finale the audience would never forget, so he took a large fish, placed it in his own mouth, and knelt at the edge of the pool. He invited the massive animal to kiss him and take the fish. He imagined a tender, heartwarming moment set to inspirational music. The sea lion, however, did not see a kiss or a beautiful bond. It saw a shiny, delicious mackerel, and its primal instincts took over. It didn't gently pluck the fish. It launched itself out of the water like a blubbery torpedo. It grabbed the fish with a powerful snapping motion, but the force of the animal's lunge was immense. The jerk on the fish, which was still clenched in the trainer's teeth, whipped his head forward with incredible violence, slamming it directly into the hard concrete edge of the pool. He was knocked out instantly and fell into the water. The crowd got their unforgettable show, but it was far from the heartwarming finale he had planned. He had forgotten that his co-star was a powerful predator whose only motivation was a bucket of fish. That concludes our massive compilation of human ego meeting a hilarious, if tragic, end. We have seen people turn themselves into grounding wires, human firecrackers, and unlisted wine ingredients. It is a reminder that the world is a dangerous place if you choose to ignore the basic rules of survival. Which of these geniuses do you think earned the crown for the absolute dumbest exit?